Today is chapter 4 of Out of My Mind. Doctors. Where do I start? Doctors really don't get me. Mom's a nurse, so I guess she speaks their language, but they sure don't know how to talk to me. I've seen dozens of doctors in my life who will try to analyze me and figure me out. None of them can fix me, so I usually ignore them and act like the dumb person that they think that I am. I paste on a blank look, focus on one wall, and pretend their questions are too hard for me to understand. It's kind of what they expect anyway. When I turned 5, it was time to think about enrolling me in school, so my mother took me to a doctor whose job it was to figure out how smart I was. She wheeled me in, locked in the brakes so my wheelchair wouldn't roll, and made sure the lap strap was fastened. When my seatbelt became undone, and it does every once in a while, I slid out of the wheelchair like a piece of spaghetti. The specialist was a very large man. The bottom of his shirt had come undone, and his stomach poked out through his belt. Gross. "My name is Dr. Hughley," he said in a booming voice. For real, I could not make that up. Hughley. "We're gonna play a game today, okay? I'll ask you some questions and get to play with the toys here. Won't that be fun?" I knew it would be a long hour. He brought out a stack of well-used, hopefully not lead-tainted wood blocks. Then I leaned in so close to me I could see the pores in his face. Gross. "Can you stack these according to size?" he said loudly and slowly, as if I was hard of hearing and stupid. But who was being stupid? Didn't he know I couldn't grab blocks? Of course I knew which block was bigger than the other, but I couldn't stack him if he paid them money. So I just took my arm, and I swept it on the floor. They fell into a clatter. I tried not to laugh as he picked them up. He breathed really hard as he reached for them. Next, he held up a glossy 8x10 card with different colors painted on each one. "Tell me when you see the color blue, Melody," he said in that voice that told me this was all just a waste of time. When the blue card showed up, I pointed to it and made a noise. "Buh," I said. "Marvelous! Tremendous! Stupendous!" he shouted. He praised me like I just passed the test again to college. If I could have rolled my eyes, I would have. Then he showed me green, so I kicked off and made a noise, but my mouth couldn't make the G sound. The doctor looked disappointed. He scribbled something on a clipboard, pulled another stack of cards, and then said loudly, "I'm going to ask you some questions now, Melody. These might be hard, but do your best, okay?" I looked at him and waited while he placed the first set of cards in front of me. "Number 1. Which one of these is not like the other?" Did he get this stuff from Sesame Street? He showed me pictures of a tomato, a cherry, a balloon, and a banana. I know he was probably looking for the balloon as the answer, but that just seemed too easy, so I pointed at the banana because the first 3 were round and red, and the banana was not. Dr. Hughley sighed and scribbled more notes. "Number 2, he said. He showed me 4 more cards. This time they were pictures of a cow, a whale, a camel, and an elephant. Which animal gives birth to a calf?" Now, I watch Animal Planet all the time, and I know a fact that all animals he pictured there have babies called a calf. I thought the doctors were supposed to be the smart ones. What to do? I hit each picture slowly and carefully, then did it once more just to make sure he understood, but I don't think he did. I heard him mumble, "Cow," as he wrote more notes, and it was clear he was giving up on me. I noticed a copy of Goodnight Moon on his bookshelf. I think it was written in Spanish. It was called Buenas Noches, Luna. That would have been a fun book to look at, but I had no way of telling him I wanted to see the book. After watching Sesame Street and Dora the Explorer a million times and sitting for hours watching the Spanish channels, I could understand quite a bit of Spanish, if it was spoken slowly enough, and at least enough words to write a title of that book. He never thought to ask me that question, of course. I knew the words and melodies of hundreds of songs, a symphony exploding inside my head with no one to hear it but me, but he never asked me about music. I knew all the colors and shapes and animals that children my age were supposed to know, plus lots more. In my head, I could count to 1,000, forward and backward. I could identify hundreds of words on sight, but that's all stuck inside. Dr. Hughley, even though he'd been to college for like a million years, would never be smart enough to see inside of me. So I put on my handicapped face, and I took my mind back to last summer when Mom and I went to the zoo. I really liked elephants, but talk about stink. Actually, Dr. Hughley sort of reminded me of one of them. My mom and doctor had no idea why I was smiling as we rolled into the waiting room while he wrote up his evaluation of me, which didn't take long. I'm always amazed at how adults assume I can't hear. They talk about me like I'm invisible, figuring I'm so stupid to understand their conversation. I learned quite a bit this way, but this conversation was really awful. He didn't even try to soften the news for my mom, who I'm sure felt like she was getting hit by a truck. He began by clearing his throat. "Mrs. Brooks," he said, "it's my opinion that Melody is severely brain damaged and profoundly low." Whoa. Even though I was only 5, I'd watched enough Easter Seals telethons to know that this was bad. Really bad. Like, I had a thud in my gut. My mom gasped and said nothing for a full minute, and finally she took a deep breath and protested quietly. "But I know she's bright. I can see it in her eyes." "You love her. It's normal to have wishful thinking," Dr. Hughley told her gently. "No, she has a spark. More than that, a flame of real intelligence. I know it," my mother insisted, sounding a little stronger. "It takes time to accept limitations of a beloved child. She has cerebral palsy, Mrs. Brooks." "I know the name of her condition, doctor," my mother said with ice in her voice. "But a person is much more than a name of a diagnosis." Good try, Mom, I was thinking, but already her voice was losing its edge, melting into the mushiness of helplessness. "She laughs at jokes," my mother told him, the ice in her voice replaced by desperation. "Right at the punchline." Mom's voice faded. What she was saying sounded ridiculous even to me, but I could see that she was just trying to find the words to explain her gut feeling that I had some smarts stuck in here. Dr. Hughley looked from her to me. He shook his head and said, "You're lucky she has the ability to smile and laugh, but Melody will never be able to walk on her own or speak a single sentence. She'll never be able to feed herself, take care of her own personal needs, or understand anything more than simple instructions. And once you accept that reality, you can deal with the future." Now that was just plain mean. My mom hardly ever cries, but she did that day. She cried and cried and cried. Dr. Hughley had given her a whole box of tissues. Both of them ignored me while she sobbed and tried to find nice words to say to make her feel better, but he didn't do a very good job. Finally, he gave her options. "You and your husband have several decisions to make," he told Mom. "You can choose to keep her at home, or you can send her to a special school for the developmentally disabled, but there aren't many choices here locally." Where did they get those almost pleasant-sounding phrases to describe kids like me? Mom made a sound that could have been the mewing of a kitten. She was just losing it. Dr. Hughley continued, "You can also decide to put Melody in a residential facility where she can be kept for and kept comfortable." He pulled out a colorful brochure with a smiling child in a wheelchair on the cover and handed it to Mom. I started trembling as she took it. "Let's see," the doctor said. "Melody is 5 now. That's a perfect age for her to learn to adjust to a new environment. You and your husband can get on with your lives without her as a burden. In the meantime, her memories will fade." I stared at Mom frantically. I didn't want to be sent away. Was I a burden? I never thought of it like that. Maybe it would be easier for them if I weren't around. I gulped, but my hands got cold. Mom wasn't looking at me. She was staring daggers at Dr. Hughley. She crumpled up the tissue she held and stood up. "Let me tell you something, Doctor. There is no way in heaven that we are sending Melody away to a nursing home." I blinked. Is this my mother? I blinked again, and she was still there, right in front of Dr. Hughley's face. She wasn't finished. "And you know what?" my mother said as she angrily hurled the brochure into the trash can. "I think you're cold and insensitive, and I hope you never have a child with difficulties. You'd probably put it out in the trash." Dr. Hughley looked shocked. "And what's worse," she continued, "I think you're wrong. Actually, I know you are. Melody has more brains hidden in her head than you'll ever have, despite those fancy degrees from the fancy schools you've got posted all over your walls." It was the doctor's turn to blink. "You got it easy. You have all your physical functions working properly. You never have to struggle to be understood. And you think you're smart because you have a medical degree?" He was wise enough to keep his mouth shut and ashamed to lower his head. Mom was on a roll. "You're not so intelligent, sir. You're just lucky. All of us who have our faculties intact are just plain blessed. Melody is able to figure out things, communicate, Manage in a world where nothing works right for her, and she's the one with true intelligence. She marched out of his office then, rolling me swiftly through the thick doors. In the hall, we did a quick fist bump. Well, the best that I could manage. My hands are no longer cold. I'm taking you right now and enrolling you in Spalding Street Elementary School, she announced with determination as we headed back to the car. Let's get busy. Whew, go mama, go. All right, that's the end of chapter 4, so answer the comprehension question when you add a response.